Recording with the one and only Mr. Leo Zagami on Wednesday, August 14th, 2024 at 12:07 p.m. Eastern Time to discuss Confessions of Illuminati, Volume 10, which the link is in the description. And before we start, I was going to ask, can you say happy birthday to my friend Monica? She loves your accent, and I told her I'd
Happy
say,
birthday then to your friend Monica and to all the people, of course, who are celebrating their birthday. We wish them all the best. This is a very particular day, the 14th of August, because in Italy, and the 15th is like a bank holiday. It's a
yeah,
special day to celebrate the ascension of, I think, of Mary in the skies or something like that.
beautiful. Thank you so much, Leo. You just made her year. Obviously, so you've been on here multiple times before, and if you go in the description, you can find a link to the books and his website. And as I post the live link, actually, Leo, could you introduce yourself real quick for everyone, and then we'll jump on into it. There's a specific part of the book I want to talk about.
Yes, I'm an author, an investigative journalist. I've been many times on your show. So people, if they want to, of course, hear about my past, they can go into the episodes that we discussed prior, all the various books of my series, Confessions of an Illuminati, because I am a former member of the Illuminati. I was also involved with Freemasonry and many other secret societies for a long time. And then from 2006, I started the blog, and later on, I started to publish the Confessions, which is now number 10, like you said. Number 10, we have also number 9. These are the latest two books. And I want to announce that in September, we will have also number 11, coinciding with the 9/11.
9/11.
We're going to have volume 11 of my Confessions, but that is going to be another episode for us.
Yes, sir. Well, you actually read my mind. So what I wanted to ask you about was the chapter um on September 11th being a satanic ritual. And so some friends and I that are also fans of your show, or you coming on my show last night, we were talking that there's a definitive difference. You have things that are satanic in nature in terms of predictive programming or revelation of the method, like the Olympic Games or like the opening of that tunnel in Europe or like CERN. And that's one aspect. But then there's the actual ritual where you see something like 9/11 where 3,000 people are killed. And there's a categorical difference between a satanic or anti-Christianity Olympic Games where it's an art piece still projecting what they believe versus it'd be like if I put up a picture of crosshairs on Leo's face
Actually,
versus
I'm going
like
to
actually
straighten up my camera just in case that they say that my
yeah, you're
body
good.
can
Yeah.
be,
Yeah. Or
but
it's
that's
it's
only my
it's
camera.
yeah. It's me saying I'm gonna like shoot Leo. That would be like a ceremony. The actual ritual would be when I shot Leo. So could you maybe go into 9/11 as a satanic ritual from the inception to George W. Bush reading about goats to everything in between?
Yeah, well, of course, this is a book on Islamic Freemasonry, on the secret societies behind the eternal conflict in the Middle East. And obviously, we had to talk about 9/11, which was a pivotal moment for American history. I consider 9/11 both a mega ritual as well as a mega psyop, but today I will focus more on the mega ritual aspects of it. The 9/11 attacks were conducted by a group of assassins headed by Mohammed Atta, who came from Egypt, who resembles very much the tradition of Hassan Isabah, who was the head of the Assassins. So we should maybe go first into the history
All right.
that connects the Western Illuminati and their Middle Eastern counterparts to make it more easy then for you viewers to understand what I'm talking about here about the mega ritual, because we always talk about an inside job. And in this book, I once again instead gave my own opinion of it, which might be a little bit contradictory to what most people think about this inside job. I call it an inside out job because
Yeah.
it connects elements of the project for the New American Century, PNAC, which was taking place at that time. Project for the New American Century is something that was founded in 1997 as a nonprofit education organization by William Crystal and Robert Kagan. And of course, it had the participation of people like George W. Bush, and Jeb Bush, let's say the whole Bush family, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, all these neocons. And it was a neoconservative, quasi-Masonic think tank they put together because they were about to launch this fake war of civilizations once again. You see, their aim is definitely to destabilize so they could then come in with their wars, with their military industrial complex, giving them and producing more weapons, which is something they always do with great joy. Not our joy, because the taxpayer always ends up paying the bill. It's a little bit like today. Today we have a potential war in the Middle East expanding in the coming weeks. We have at the same time the same thing happening also with Ukraine and Russia, which is expanding into Russian territory. These are never-ending debts that the system is constructing around us in order to achieve the Great Reset, which, as you know, we have discussed in previous books, Volume 7 in particular, Volume 9, and so on. But going back to 9/11, there was this group of people. Included also Dan Quayle, included a lot of Bill Bennett. There was all these people, and of course also the Illuminati kingpin himself, who authored a book called The Clash of Civilizations and the Remaking of the World Order, which is Samuel P. Huntington, who passed away in 2008. Now, I repeat, PNAC was dissolved in 2017 after the end of course, the Bush presidency, after also the end of the Obama presidency, meaning that with the arrival of Trump, there was a change that they disliked. And of course, we are still viewing the process of this presidential race that we hope will turn in favor of Trump, but there is always a possibility for some kind of last-minute makeover by the usual suspects. However, going back to the Order of the Assassins, which inspired Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda itself, it's if we want to discuss it in terms of where it comes from, Al-Qaeda comes from the Salafi jihadist movement that originated with the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood gave birth to a lot of organizations that unfortunately are still alive and kicking today, like Hamas and other organizations. Let's say that from the Muslim Brotherhood comes most of today's fundamentalism. And I explained also how the Muslim Brotherhood, which is, well, at least in name, a Sunni organization, influenced also the Shia part of the Islamic faith that, as you know, has been fighting against the Sunni for over 1,000 years. But this battle between these two factions started immediately after the death of Muhammad within his own family. So there was this division. The Shia eventually manifested as being very strong in the early days of the Islamic, let's say, Islamic expansion. And they were behind the creation of the Fatimid dynasty and their empire that was really important for a period of time before the Sunnis will come back very strong, and with Saladin will take over the show, and the Shia in the end will be restricted to what today we know as today the most powerful state, Shia state today is Iran. We have also Shia elements, of course, and presence in Iraq, and we have them also in Pakistan and other countries, but the most important Shia country today is Iran. However, the Islamic Freemasons who kind of raised at the same time as their European counterparts, because, you know, all these various courts, like the Iranian court, the Persian court, as it was known back in the days, immediately sent a couple of their princes to get initiated, and so did many others in the Middle East. So Freemasonry is born, as you know, officially, formally in 1717 in London. There used to be, of course, Masonic lodges before that, but they were not structured as a Grand Lodge. From that moment onwards, there is this Masonic structure, which then recognizes similar structures around the world, and that is the Grand Lodge of England, that then later on in 1813 will become the United Grand Lodge of England. However, in the Middle East, of course, just like in Europe and in other parts of the world, where Freemasonry tends to absorb previous mystery schools and previous sects and the teachings of what is basically the Illuminati network from time immemorial, made of different realities around the world. And in the Middle East, they absorbed, of course, the elements that came from the Middle East. But there is a little bit more than that. I explain in this book that in reality, Freemasonry itself, the Knights Templars, were inspired, first of all, by the Islamic secret societies. So we can say that really the Middle East is the birthplace of the Illuminati as well as Freemasonry. And this is not far-fetched. This is a fact. It's a fact based on research conducted by credible Masonic historians, and also it's evident in the rituals. I mean, if we go and study the rituals of Freemasonry, they're based on allegories from the Old Testament that are it's in the Middle East. The Old Testament takes place in the Middle East. It doesn't take place on the moon or another place on planet Earth. So there is always this connection. Hiram Abiff, where was Hiram? I mean, if we go and see the actual burial place of Hiram, who was supposed to be the master builder, is actually in today's Lebanon. So the Middle East inspired from the very early days the European secret societies, because they were, of course, much more complex, much more developed. The Middle East was the birthplace of the ancient Sumerian and Mesopotamian, and of course, the ancient Sumerian tradition. It's at the basis of our Western tradition. And these secret societies were Zoroastrians, were Manichaean, were of many different faiths. And once Islam arrived, they didn't simply disappear. Islam kind of absorbed, and the people behind some of these secret societies decided to utilize themselves Islam. They were not really happy with the Quran. Some of them thought it was way too simplistic, but it was a good way of controlling the masses. That has been immediately understood by the people who embraced Islam. So Islam is not just a religion like Christianity, the one, that the rulers embraced because they really believed that would make a change. Like when Constantine embraced the Christian faith and then transformed the Roman Empire into a Christian empire. It was because, of course, there was the presence for a long time of the sect under Rome in the catacombs and all that. But it also because there were people who really believed, including the emperor himself and his mother, that the Christian faith was something that could really enrich them spiritually. When it comes to Islam, it's a little bit different, because at times the people who embraced Islam were the very first enemies of Islam in the first place. Like when Muhammad started to spread Islam, he did it in the context of Mecca. And Mecca was actually inhabited by a tribe that was pretty hostile to Muhammad initially. But later on, by the fourth caliph, they understood the power of Islam. And so then they wanted to establish their own caliph.
Yeah.
So you see, it's not really about saying, oh, wow, Muhammad, what a great guy. It's about the Quran being a great book to mind control millions, if not billions of people. That's how it is, still to this day. Of course, you have the godly element. And like I said in this book, I'm sure there is people, and from my own experience also in the Middle East, in Turkey, I saw there is genuine people who love God and who really are believing that there is genuinity in the Quran, but it's very rare because then we have a lot of Muslims that simply give importance to the Quran because it's their imam, is their supreme leader of some kind who is telling them you have to follow. It's not because they have a critical thinking and they embrace it out of their own will, because a lot of times in some of the countries where the Quran is spread, they're reciting words in Arab that they don't even understand. It's a little bit like with the Catholic faith until we had the traditional mass. It's a beautiful mass, but most people didn't really understand what they were saying.
Yeah,
So
well, it was in Latin.
Yeah, in Latin, and most people in the world don't really talk Latin. So when it comes to the order of the Assassins, they were born out of the Cairo Lodge that was created during the Fatimid dynasty. I explain this in my book, and I explain how the Assassins came from the Nizari. The Nizari Assassins were a sect, a Shia sect, that kind of got in conflict with the Egyptian authorities and found their way in these fortresses around the Middle East, where they actually hold power until the Mongols arrived and kicked their asses many centuries later. So they were very powerful. The Assassin structure is actually what inspired the Knights Templars, and many of the traditions that we see reflected in the knighthoods, and the Templars were not the first knighthood. The first knighthood was the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre, and then but the knighthood tradition in general was born out of the fact that the Pope wanted to protect the pilgrims and at the same time stop the expansion of the Islam in the Middle East. So they had to regain power there where it was lost, there with the Byzantium Empire that collapsed at one point. The Pope wanted to regain this power, and that's why at one point convinced everybody that they should sacrifice their own lives to fight Islam, the infidels. Now, on both sides, no, they call infidels the other, no? But the thing is that the Pope had to also transform a Christian concept that was a concept Jesus said he was embracing peace, he wasn't embracing war. The way he spread his religion wasn't through the sword. And so he had to transform this concept, and that's what I explain here. They had to borrow what they saw in the Middle East, especially in places like Syria. The Pope sent his emissaries in secret. They got initiated, they view what was happening. They saw that basically people were sacrificing themselves for this book, the Quran. They were killed, they will kill and they will be killed because of a book. That wasn't happening for the Bible. There was no, up until let's say the turn of the first millennium, Christianity was not a religion that wanted to spread that kind of modality. I mean, sacrificing yourself for Jesus, yes, but not in war, not by killing other people. So there was a radical transformation here that was demanded. And at that point, they created the knighthoods. And when they saw also how the secret societies operated, in particular the Assassins, who were completely brainwashed, and they were different from the rest of Islam because they were Shia and they were actually fighting the Sunni expansion. The Templars thought they could be ideal allies to use as killers against Saladin and his Sunni invaders. And so the Pope asked them to go to the Middle East, but of course they also had to maintain a certain respectability. They couldn't just arrive in the Middle East and kill everybody, slaughter people, because it will go visibly against the tenets of Christianity. So the Templars asked the assassins to do their dirty job, to go and kill certain representatives of the Sunni Caliphate, because they couldn't do it. They were, I mean, if they just went and slaughtered or killed these people in the middle of the night, they would be viewed in a negative way, even by their own Christian allies and stuff. So it was a very convenient alliance. On one, let's say that they learned a lot, and they actually dressed up even like the assassins. And so their mantle, their white mantle, the red cross, all the symbology, the way the hierarchy of the Knights Templars was divided was basically identical to the one of the assassins. And they became also close allies in secret against the Sunni. And this alliance went on for all the period of the Crusades until, like I said, the assassins, the Nizari, had to retire from the fortresses once the Mongols arrived, but that's happened much later. During the period with the Sunni and with, of course, the Caliph was the famous Saladin, there was, though, some contacts also between the Templars and their enemies that were contacts that apparently were more than contacts. There is those who claim to this day that Saladin himself was initiated into the Templars. Now, we don't know how credible this affirmation is. But in my book, I explained that basically from that moment onwards, this alliance was born. And after a few hundred years of the Ottoman Empire that will eventually take over from the Seljuk Turks, who had expanded with Saladin and became the ultimate empire of the Middle East. For 800 years, they kept peace and stability in the region. They were, of course, Muslim. Their capital was in what used to be Constantinople, Istanbul. They had a sultan that was considered almost a god, but was still respectful of the tenets of Sunni Islam, so he will not declare himself a god. That was the error that was done prior by the Fatimid dynasty, which instead in Egypt, like a lot of other schismatic Shia Muslim bodies, transformed the religion in a way that in the end they almost viewed actually some of them, like the Nizari or the Druze, viewed one of the caliphs, of the heads of the Fatimid dynasty as being a god on earth. So this is, you see, so let's say that Islam is very different from Christianity, because Christianity in the first few centuries was highly controlled, edited, and produced by an empire who had all the interest that this religion stayed on track and didn't deviate in any way. That didn't happen with the Islamic religion, because there wasn't really, I mean, like I said, there were even conflicts within Islam, and so there were also empires at war with each other with different versions of Islam. Now, the prevailing one, like I said, will always be the Sunni one. But even if Egypt was no longer Shia once the Fatimid dynasty fall, Egypt stayed as a place of reference, of importance for the Islamic Illuminati, because the Islamic Illuminati were created, like I said earlier, by that merger of ancient religion like the Zoroastrian, the Manichaean, certain Gnostic sects, and so on, with Islam. And so the Shia religion, because it was, of course, opposing the Sunni religion, was also the one that saw the birth of the Sufis, which are amongst the most important secret societies in Islam to this day. So, and initially, like I said, Sufism spread within Shia Islam, absorbing all those elements. Even pagan elements were absorbed. And actually, in general, even the Sunni version of Islam, which is the most traditional, has absorbed pagan elements. They just don't want to admit it. That's why we have a moon and a star here. That's why the moon goddess in general was of importance in those areas and was kind of still kept, even if, of course, they rejected any form of paganism. At one point, like I explained, even Muhammad himself, when he wanted to go back to Mecca after he was kicked out and he went to Medina, he admitted, he said, and this became the basis for the famous satanic verses of Salman Rushdie, he said that these goddesses were not so bad. And that was actually criticized by the Muslims themselves. Said, what did Muhammad do? Did he lost the plot here? What did he do? So in my book, I explain this alliance with the Illuminati in Cairo, because that's their headquarters. It had always been the headquarters of the Islamic Illuminati. And not only because of Islam, but because Egypt predates Islam by thousands of years of tradition and of culture, as you know. The Illuminati were born there in Memphis, in Alexandria of Egypt. The Gnostics, we discussed in volume 9, the Gnostics are the early Illuminati, you know. And so today, when they have to discuss peace, where do they go? All the opposing factions. They still go to Cairo. Cairo is the place where I conducted for this book a research. In that research, going there for over a month, 40 days, I spent there in Cairo personally in 2003, finding traces of this Cairo Lodge. There is the last authors that discussed the Cairo Lodge were over 100 years ago, like Edith Miller, Nesta Webbs. They actually mentioned the Cairo Lodge. But since then, none of contemporary so-called conspiracy theorists or people who discuss the reality of the conspiration reality have ever mentioned the Cairo Lodge, because for the last 100 years, there's been a shift in the interest of everything conspirational blamed on the Jews. The Jews have been blamed, have become the scapegoats. And so, because the Islamic religion in general, but all their branches, profoundly hate the Jewish faith and the Jewish people, nobody has felt the necessity to do a book like this. But a book like this has a lot to offer. Inside the book, I show an image which is showed vaguely here on the cover.
Mm-hmm.
Is actually the Baphomet, the original Baphomet, which was Muhammad on a cross. Muhammad on a cross is an exclusive, which nobody will ever find anywhere else, that was given to me by the late Grand Master of a Sufi order, Gabriele Mandel Khan, and he published it in the Islamic Dictionary in Italian. But then this was found in a Knights Templar church between Syria and Turkey, and it's still to this day not shown to the public and kept in a depot in Istanbul, because they are scared that once they put it in a museum, some fundamentalist Islamic freak will blow up the whole place, because it is, of course, a contradiction with Islam. Islam doesn't represent Muhammad in any way, shape, or form, and let alone putting him on a cross, which is something like completely extra. But people have to understand that the Shia Nizari assassins were not traditional Muslims. They had very particular kind of beliefs. And when they converted the Knights Templars at that point embraced their own mysteries with this Baphomet figure, which is Muhammad on a cross. Now, Muhammad on a cross doesn't mean that Muhammad went on a cross and sacrificed himself like Jesus Christ did for humankind. It is a symbolic thing, because the cross existed even before Christianity, and it has an esoteric meaning that these people knew about. So that was the original Baphomet. Then later on, Baphomet was transformed by Eliphas Levi, the occultists, the Illuminati, the Shabbatian, and then Of course, Aleister Crowley claimed to even be Baphomet himself in the high degrees of the order, and he signed himself as Baphomet. Things have changed since then. We also have an image of Baphomet, which is paraded in the Capitol Hills of the United States of America by the Satanic Temple. But that is not the Baphomet of the origins, and that's why I show the Baphomet of the origins here, just like I show the new Baphomet in Volume 9, which is on the cover here. So the actual alliance between the Illuminati of the West, which are represented also by the Knights, the Knights Templar, the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre, the Teutonic Knights, all the various Knights, the Knights of Malta, later on called the Knights of Malta, they were called the Knights of Rhodes before, and Cyprus. All this is, this alliance, very important for the transformation of this myth of the Assassins from Shia into Sunni, operated by Freemasonry in Egypt, and I explain this in detail, of course, in the book, that eventually produced Salafi jihadism. The Muslim Brotherhood is a production of the Freemasons, of the British Freemasons and his allies and his agents, like Jamal ad-Din al-Afghani. Jamal ad-Din al-Afghani is a central figure to this book, which is very seldomly discussed in this way, even in Islamic circles, because he's considered the father of modern Islam. But when you go and view his story, you see that this guy, it's a mystery, and it's also a guy who has worked as a secret agent for the Brits, as a secret agent probably for the Russians too. He was a friend of Madame Blavatsky. He was involved with people from the Theosophical Society, as well as being himself a Muslim leader. And after being initiated into Freemasonry in Egypt, he got a patent from the Grand Orient of France and created his own obedience, which was very influential in Egypt. And so, you see, we go back to Cairo. We go always back to the Cairo Lodge. And Jamal ad-Din al-Afghani is the guy who brought back the Shia Assassins Creed. Now we say Assassin's Creed, people connected to the video game, of course. Yeah. But it is, the video game was influenced by the Assassins. So this he basically, the Sunni embraced that kind of fundamentalism that didn't really belong to them, but belonged to the Shia Nizari, and created the Salafi jihadism that ultimately produced the Al-Qaeda that attacked on 9/11. And the ritual was sealing, to seal the alliance between the New Templars, people like George W. Bush, like Dick Cheney. These were the New Templars, either involved like Cheney in Freemasonry or involved in the Skull and Bones, which is, as you know, an outpost of the Illuminati. And all this was done with their old allies in the Middle East, coming from exactly the same kind of background. Mohammed Atta and his friends were working together with their Western counterparts. So that's why I call it an inside-out job, and I don't say it's just an inside job. And, oh, yeah, they like to blame everything on this or this other group of people. But then we have to be realistic about it. Somebody conducted, even if they were facilitating what they did, just like Thomas Crooks was facilitated on the 13th of July, and everybody was turning the other way when he was going up there. They gave him the ladder to go up and shoot the president, because, I mean, that is so bad. But the same thing was done on 9/11. They turned the other way, the FBI, the CIA. And the result was, of course, a mega ritual of sacrifice that will instigate the clash of civilizations that Samuel P. Huntington had talked about in his book that was extremely influential for these people. And so there was both the influence, of course, of the Bushes, but also of all those people who, like I said, belong to that project for the New American Century that represent a moment of transformation for America. America that wants to stay on top after the fall of the Soviet Union, after the end of the Cold War, find a new enemy. And of course, this enemy was the old enemy of the Templars. I mean, it was the old enemy and non-enemy of the Templars, because like we said, the Templars were working in secret with the Nizari Assassins against the other Muslims, but there was always some kind of deal behind the scenes, so they will not be viewed as being evil. Now, we know that the practices of the Assassins were related to hashish, smoking hashish, being blindfolded. In the fortress, they will be brought in a garden full of ladies, of honey, of great things. And then they will be said, if you want to join us in paradise, and this is our paradise, you have to sacrifice yourself and give everything to the order. So that's also what Muhammad Atta did when he came here in America. He wasn't really living the life of a typical Muslim. He would be going to clubs, doing cocaine, smoking hashish, watching porn, because he was projected towards suiciding himself, and at the same time that as an ultimate sacrifice. But they were promised, as it happens in Islamic fundamentalism, virgins and many other things once they have sacrificed themselves. They have killed themselves in the name of God and killed others, unfortunately. So we know that Islamic fundamentalism has various phases, but the first phase of importance is the Assassins, though we know that Islam expanded very fast in a very violent way. It's not true that they were like, they will not come in the middle of the night and slip your throat necessarily. What they would do initially, when the first caliphs, the Rashidun Caliph, they were connected to Muhammad, so they were either his friends or disciples or family members, before the eventual split with Ali and the Shia. All this early stage of Islam, they were expanding, they were fierce, but they will kill only the pagans in a very violent way. They will leave the Christians and the Jews alone if they simply pay the tax. And I explain in my book how this tax in places like Sicily became the very root for the mafia. Mafia is actually an Arab word. It comes from an Arab word, and it actually was born out of the fact that for almost 3 centuries we had a Muslim domination of Sicily. So I talk also from a personal stand, because in my DNA I have the blood. Zagami is obviously an Iranian Persian surname. You can understand that. I mean, you don't need to be when you say Zagami today, to this day, I go around and there is an Iranian said, but are you Iranian? So it is obvious that they were Shia. They were in the island where my ancestors come from. It's called Ali Kudi, which is Ali Kur, the rock of Ali. Ali, the main Shia reference. There was a period in which Sicily was Sunni, but only very briefly before it was conquered by the Shia. So the Shia forced Sicily into converting. They did also good things. They brought oranges. They brought a lot of other stuff that makes now the cuisine of Sicily the best in the world, I can say, because in the middle of the Mediterranean, it has absorbed all the flavors and all the traditions. But having said that, and then, of course, we know what happened later on, because other ancestors from my grandmother's side, not my grandfather's side, they were the ones who liberated Sicily instead from the Arabs. And in fact, in my family, there's a house in Italy, I have original paintings where the Arabs are giving the keys of Sicily to the conquerors, the Normans. They're actually telling,
oh shit,
are the keys. And I have these precious paintings in Italy. And they were, of course, the ones that came with Frederick the Great, and with they were Germans, basically, that took control of the situation. They liked it very much. I mean, Germany, with all the respect, is a great country, but you can't compare the weather of Sicily and the food and everything with Germany.
With Germany,
So
yeah.
they like to be insist, and still to this day, the Germans every summer go down from their autobahn into Italy, and then with their the euro now, of course, it's all over Europe, but there is a difference because the Germans earn a lot more than the Italians, and so they can come in Italy every summer and have a great holiday. That is still, I guess, part of this ancient colonial trace that we never lost. Also, the alliance that was sealed between Hitler and Mussolini, the infamous alliance, in some way can be traced to that. But having said all this, the 9/11 ritual is very significant because Bush himself, George W. Bush, was a protagonist of this ritual. Of the hundreds of flight schools in the United States, Mohammed Atta, the ringleader of the 9/11 terrorists, attended a school that was located, imagine, in the very same city President George W. Bush was visiting the same fateful morning the attacks took place. Now, what a coincidence. And he was presiding over the pet goat ritual. There is this book, The Pet Goat, and it's like a reminiscent of the sabbatic goat. And we know how fake Bush was while he was in front of these children, not even blinking an eye when they communicate what was happening. And he was there. And this is not a coincidence, because Bush acted as a satanic high priest in this situation, and I explained how this happened. And he was listening to these little black children, because also the color of the skin matters for occultists at one point, you know? So there is definitely a lot of symbolism around the Bush Baphomet Black Mass, as we want to rename it, that took roughly, took place roughly 10 miles south of Sarasota, which is in Venice, Florida. And the most disturbing thing is that the actual, like I said, Mohammed Atta was actually training there. So it's either an incredible synchronicity, a diabolical synchronicity, but at the same time, we know that there was this alliance. So the Inside Out job brings back the New Templars and the New Assassins. Just to make it very simple for your viewers, so we don't need to, then the rest they can find, of course, in my book. But it brings them back together. And the result is that we are all brought for a ride and fall into this trap that led us into these military confrontations that unfortunately were very real. Iraq, Afghanistan. The military industrial complex made a lot of money. And when they made enough money, Joe Biden just pulled out of Afghanistan and left billions of dollars of weapons, like it was just, oh, okay.
Nothing, yeah.
Let's leave them to our friends, the Taliban, who have treated us so well for so many years. I mean, this is insane. So the book gives you an idea of this inside-out job, of this whole evil project, how it was obtained between the Salafi jihadist mercenaries and the Sabbatean Frankists and the Vatican Illuminati on this side with the project for the New American Century. And I think that this book is unique because it has not been criticized even by Muslims. Even the Sufis left a 5-star review for this book saying, well, we have to admit that what's written here is true. You can go and check. I was shocked myself when I saw it. I mean, this book is not telling you the Sufis are lovely and they're all, because after 9/11, they wanted to create this thing. On one side, the Salafi jihadists, on the other side, the peaceful Sufis that talk about peace and love and the poetry of Jalaluddin Rumi. It's all bullshit. So it's just it's lies. So the Order of the Assassins inspired global jihadism. And if you want to know really how things take place to this day in the Middle East, you need to read this book. But it's not because I want to be a car salesman that I want you to read this book. It's because I haven't found, really honestly, another book today, in 2024, that brings you the same kind of information. I mean, you can speculate. And unfortunately, that's the problem here. And that's the problem with many people in the so-called alternative media. They kind of say, oh, we need to blame everything on this specific group of people, the Jews, the Jesuits, or whatever. The Jesuits, for example, are not Catholics. They are Jesuits. The Jews shouldn't be blamed because you can't blame a whole race. You have to blame the Sabbatean Frankists who are the heretics of that race. And the same can be said also within Islam, though Islam is a problem because all of the institutions are corrupt. There is not one institution that is not corrupt, because it was from the very start that the Quran was influenced by the Illuminati. And I explain also how Muhammad himself was inspired by the cousin of Khadija, his first wife, who was himself a Christian, but not a ordinary kind of Christian, but a specific kind of Christian that belonged to the, let's say, the Jewish side of Christianity, meaning that within Judaism there was a specific Christian group called the Ebionites, and the Ebionites didn't believe in the divinity of Jesus because they were Jews. They embraced Jesus as a Messiah, but not his divinity. And we can see that actually reflected in the Quran, because the Quran doesn't accept the divinity of Jesus. However, they have so much respect for Jesus that they send somebody else on the cross instead than him. That is part of the legacy of the Gnostic tradition, because the Gnostics said that there was this kind of transmigration of the soul from one body to the other to avoid that Jesus would be crucified. They will go and crucify somebody that looked like him. I mean, it is, of course, very far out hypothesis, but that's what some Gnostic sects said, and that's what the Islamic said. So this cousin of Khadija, Waraka ibn Nafal, who was this Ebionite Christian priest, was himself an Illuminati of his time, and teach Muhammad the secrets, the Gnostic secrets that he then eventually absorbed. He went into this cave for decades to try to download, with the help of an archangel Gabriel, this book, which eventually became the Quran.
Mm.
And inevitably, people, once he went back into Mecca and said, you have to convert, I received the Quran, they said, well, in Mecca in particular, they had so many gods. They didn't want to give up all these gods. They had like 360 gods that they were worshipping in Mecca. So they said, well, we don't like you here. And that's why eventually he was pushed out of Mecca. But like I said, even the most pagan forces in the Middle East, when they saw the potential of the Quran as also a brainwashing tool, and this can be seen also in more recent times. When Jamaluddin al-Afghani created modern Islam, he said, though, in his lodge to his own disciples, that it was a great opportunity to manipulate people using this religion. But like all Illuminati that for over 1,000 years were operating from Cairo, their main religion was science and reason. So they were giving all this illusion, religious illusion, spiritual illusion to the masses, while they kept themselves very much together, and they were embracing the religion of the Illuminati, which, as you know, is a anti-Christian but anti-God religion in general. I mean, the Illuminati are non-believers. They believe only in science to this day. And that's why they embrace communism. Communism, the rejection of God, and materialism as their only belief. And that is strange, for it's obvious that the Muslims don't want the truth about their own Freemasons and Illuminati to surface. They don't want people to know that the Muslim Illuminati initiated Aleister Crowley. And I actually talk about this in my book. I mentioned the exact sect in North Africa between Morocco and Egypt that initiated Crowley. And I also explain how this sect inspired him to write the Book of the Law. The name Ivas, that is this messenger of Horus that Crowley talks about, in reality is a transformation of the name of the secret society that he was himself initiated in. He was initiated in a group called the Aisawa, and so then he talks about Ivas as the messenger. It is a way of him of, in a way, cryptically deliver the truth only to those few people who will understand it. So I think that it's quite shocking for most people that there is this so strong connection between Islam and the Illuminati. A connection that is so strong that influenced also the birth of the Sabbatean heresy. Let's not forget that Shabbatai Zevi, the Messiah of the Jews, that convinced millions of Jews, half of the Jewish population of Europe at the time, in 1666, was forced to utterly embrace Islam in front of the Sultan.
1666.
And gave birth to the Dommeh, which are the crypto Jews that still reside to this day. And so there is a lot that we could talk about, but the ritual, going back to, let's say, today we have discussed that as the main subject, the 9/11 ritual, because of course it's of great importance and we are about to approach 9/11. And so we need definitely to discuss this 9/11 ritual. The 9/11 ritual, I think, was fundamentally built to absorb and redirect this hate, this energy. What was the immediate reaction of most Americans after they saw these Twin Towers going down?
Cohesion, and then anger at external, an external group.
And that anger could finally be is a very powerful energy, is a very powerful force.
Yeah.
That was then directed on what they wanted to, they wanted to make money, basically. They wanted oil, they wanted to sell weapons, they wanted to conquer
build bases
land,
all around Iran, and
strategy, Iraq, Afghanistan. Of course, being in Iraq means also being very close to their main enemy, which is Iran. Iran acts at times as a proxy for Russia. Now it's also involved very much with China. We are seeing it now with the expansion of the war in northern Israel with Hezbollah. Hamas is trying to arrive to a conciliatory position because soon there's going to be nothing left in Gaza. So there is Hamas is reduced to the minimum terms after the killing of their head and all the others. So Hamas is a little bit fading out, but Hezbollah is very much alive. And so the Hezbollah is a direct manifestation of the power of Iran. While Hamas, being a Sunni group, was also financed by Qatar. That is also what I try to explain in this book. All the divisions that we have seen built from the very early centuries of the Islamic expansion till now are starting to fade out because China and Russia see this as an opportunity to unify Islam against America. While at the time of 9/11, the whole of Islam rejoiced, unfortunately. And this is a reality, guys. I mean, a lot of people who are watching, they are very much... I am really saddened about the fact that, for example, most spectators of InfoWars today are anti-Semitic. It angers me that the people in the alternative media don't have the courage to tell them, you are in the wrong. You can't blame everything on a race of people. You can blame it on an ideology, but you can't blame it on a race of people. That's extremely stupid, extremely ignorant.
Stupid. Above all
But
else, it's stupid.
unfortunately, when I say this, then there will be people commenting saying, oh, you
Mossad agent Leo.
Jewish Zionist, this and that and all the other. That's why the last chapter of this book is dedicated to explaining the reality of the Sabbatean Frankists and their most influential publication, which is the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, or the Sages of Zion, however you want to call it. Now, in this chapter, I explain how this book was born. This book that was published for the first time in 1925, almost 100 years ago, by an Ebionite priest, by a Maronite priest, so I think based in Lebanon, and then it was soon picked up in the Middle East also by the Islamic world, and it was published in every country. This is such an influential book in the Middle East today that they made TV series in Syria. In Iran, they made many editions. In Egypt, they made a TV series. You have to understand, if you want to learn about the hate that Islam has today for the Jewish religion and the Jewish people, a hate that wasn't existent at the time of the Ottoman Empire, where everybody was living in peace. Okay, the Muslims and the Christians had to pay, and let's say, more tax than their Islamic counterparts. Why? Because the empire was Turkish. They had this silly rule that, of course, was very convenient for them, because what they did from the very early days of the expansion of Islam was to respect the people who are cited in the Quran. That means the Jews and the Christians. They couldn't kill them. It was in the Quran. It was prohibited to kill them. But they could tax them. And by taxing them, it would be a little bit like the IRS coming to your door and saying, well, if you convert to Islam, I'm not going to tax you. They say, your taxes will be forgiven this year. A lot of people will then capitulate and say, okay, I'm going to go 5 times a day and bow down. If you don't let me pay any tax, who cares? It happened. There were weak people who decided to convert, but there were also strong people that told them to go and screw themselves. So in this expansion of Islam, it wasn't until the Assassins that then there was the killing of the innocent. You see, before, until, let's say, the Assassins, Islam expanded in a way that was respectful of the confrontation that would be on the battlefield between knights, respectful of the rules of engagement. When instead with the Assassins, it's like modern terrorists. They blow you up, blow up your family, blow up innocent Muslims who are just passing by. They don't care.
No.
So that is the transformation. But I think that I have more or less answered your question. The only thing I can close down, because obviously after they have to go and read the book, but the ritual of 9/11 produced what they wanted, unfortunately. It was, for them, a successful ritual. The results are still visible.
Still unfolding.
There was also a restriction of the freedom of people, with all the various Patriot Act and all that bullshit. So you are still to this day witnessing the consequences of 9/11. And I invite people to go and check the real story of 9/11 in this book, because I think that they will be pretty shocked. I mean, when you want to blame only the Jews for 9/11, is that correct? No, it's not. When you want to blame only the Vatican for 9/11, is that correct? No, it's not. You can blame certain people within the Vatican, certain people within the Jewish, and certain people also within the US government. In that case, of course, George W. Bush, his father, and the whole group that hangs around every year also at the Bohemian Club. I mean, This year, we have seen it on the 13th of July. They were doing the cremation of care ceremony, and while they were doing the ceremony, they tried to kill Donald J. Trump. And the same thing could have happened on 9/11. I'm sure that they had some kind of ritual to celebrate what they were doing.
That's and I think you hit it. Is I don't even care about like the the political correctness of hating one group of people. I just people are allowed to hate me. I don't care. I think it is intellectually stunted to blame everything on a group of people because for me, I look at it rationally. I'm like, I don't think it'd be like saying, all corporate greed originates from Goldman Sachs. No, that doesn't mean that there isn't corporate greed from Goldman Sachs, but there is from GE, Northrop Grumman, Walmart.
But
It
we
happened.
need to go back to the roots, and then we discover that everything comes from Federal Reserve, and the
Well, yeah,
family
then yeah, of course, and it's
put together the Federal Reserve. So I
but
mean,
no, but my point is like you can find these negative and nefarious characteristics, and all is the Mossad evil? Sure, but so is the CIA and MI6. Like, so to me, when someone goes, "It's all the Jews," I'm like that to me, that's just intellectually stupid.
yeah, it's
There
very simplistic, overly simplistic, and ignorant.
it's the same people. It's the equivalent of Trump derangement syndrome for people on the right. It's Jewish derangement. I'm sure there are bad people in the upper echelons of Israel, as there are everywhere. I just don't
But
think
in
that.
fact, I explain how these
Yeah,
bad people were involved even in the foundation of Israel,
yeah,
because
yeah,
Zionism was hijacked by the ones, the Sabbatai and Frankists, who then created labor Zionism. Labor Zionism gave birth even to the kibbutz, that it's a kind of communistic way of living that we have, very popular in Israel, where they all live in these communities that have this kind of socialistic DNA. So there is definitely an element of the Jewish people, just like there is an element here in America. I mean,
no,
half of the Americans are going after Kamala Harris and that other idiot. So, I mean,
no,
we need
then
to be a little bit honest about it. It's not like America is this country of patriots. We have at the moment half of the country which is brainwashed and
yeah,
idiotic.
yeah, I just don't. I don't think conniving and corruption and military false flags and intelligence agency overreach. I just don't think that's the exclusive providence of Israel. I think we have it
Now,
too.
on
I
the
think
7th of October, this is a book which also talks about the 7th of October, which was, of course, a turning point, a pivotal point, just like 9/11, and has many similarities with 9/11, because, of course, there was part of the Jewish deep state, of the labor Zionists who wanted to get rid also, of course, of their prime minister, which is Netanyahu, seen as the ultimate evil. So putting him in difficulty, okay, let's turn the other way where people are passing and going into Israel. I mean, guys, here we're talking about the most sophisticated between Shin Bet, the military side, and Mossad. They have the most sophisticated equipment. The IDF also itself has the most sophisticated equipment to detect anything that passes through the Gaza
yeah,
Strip into the, and they did nothing. Come on, guys, you must.
yeah,
It's so. So there was part of the deep state, the Israel deep state, who of course stand themselves on the other side, just like it happened on 9/11.
yeah,
And the result was exactly the same, because now we are in a ever critical situation, in a tension that is building up every day more and more since the 7th of October, that will probably lead to an expansion of this war.
yeah,
And why this war needs to be expanded, and we are about to terminate today our transmission, so I want to conclude with this thought, which I think is very important. Why they're doing all this? By opening two war fronts, that basically means enlarging the Third World War, the World War III, both with Ukraine going into Russia and with the expansion of the war in the Middle East, probably Israel invading Lebanon or something, and Iran reacting and everything else. And of course, the Americans involved because they sent a nuclear submarine, they sent all this military. by expanding this and creating two wars that will drain the economy even more.
Yeah.
Already we have been drained by one war. Two wars will send us not into recession, it will send us in front of queues of people wanting to eat. They are gonna crack the economy if they have it their way. That's why it's critical, it's very important at the moment to stop Kamala Harris and bots to get into the White House. However, these people might play the same cards in a dirty with their dirty tricks like they did in 2020. I hope not. I hope not. I hope not. But that's a possibility. And in that case, unfortunately, like I already envisioned in volume 4 of my confession, the inevitability of a civil war is around the corner.
And what you said about cracking the economy and people who just want to eat, that they might play into that. How would you get people to enlist in the military? The same way you have throughout all of human history, 3 square meals and a bed.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
So that is what unfortunately we have as an option this year, and we are about to assist to either the last election of a US president or either a moment of reckoning, a moment of coming back together and saving this nation from the deep state and from the people who actually wanted to kill Trump on the 13th of July. I will continue this discussion from exactly this point the next time we speak, because as I told you,
volume 11.
prior to start this broadcast, I will be publishing also volume 11 in September. And the subject of this book, I will not disclose now, but it's groundbreaking, just as volume 10. And so I think we will have a lot to talk about for our next chat.
I look forward to it. Shoot me an email with it whenever. And guys, please go in the description. If you enjoy Leo coming on my show, these shows are free. Go buy Leo's book. Go give him a couple bucks. He comes on here.
Volume 10 is definitely in regards to the Middle East to make you understand what is really happening. It will make you smarter. I can tell you that this book makes you smarter about what's going on in the Middle East. So I really stress you read it, everybody else reads it.
I did read it. I finished it. I read it on Kindle.
And what was your own review?
My own review is, well, it's the only book I've found that adequately goes in. Obviously, it's a giant book, but it's the only book that adequately goes into 9/11 as being a satanic ritual. I've read that before as passing theories, but it's like there's a million books on JFK. That's not necessarily like a unique thing. You actually went into and expanded and explained, like you said, the inside outside job. It wasn't solely Islamic terrorism, but it also wasn't solely the CIA. It's two things are possible at the same time. But as well, and I think most importantly, is the concept that it was more than just a terror attack. It was more than just a false flag. It was a satanic ritual. And you do have to come to terms with just the level of evil that's out there. And that's what you do in the book is you show it's not just a terrorist. A terrorist attack's bad enough. It is truly at the highest levels. It is a cult worship of a dark lord. It is the opposition to all that is good and holy in this world. And to me is more quantitative evidence of why you should turn to God. It's Leo. If anything, you should get a check from the church for turning people back to God.
Thank you so much. God bless you and God bless all your viewers.
Yes, sir.
And of course, we speak soon because I'm sure that you will appreciate very much the content and the analysis I gave in volume 11 because once again, we're going to go back and talk about 9/11, but this time it's going to be under a different point of view. And so you see there is various angles that we can take because either it is a mega ritual, but also it was a mega psychological operation. And so we need also to analyze that side of things the next time we talk with each other.
Beautiful. I look forward to it. Guys, please go in the description. You can find a link to Leo's website as well as the links to his books.
And if you want to know more about Ukraine, I would suggest for those who still don't have it, also volume 9, because as you know, volume 9 I discuss all the secret societies that actually created this fictional Ukrainian identity out of thin air in the last 170 years. So,
Yes, sir.
thank you very much for having me on, and God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Leo. God bless you as well. Thank you so much for your time. Guys, please go in the description. Please go buy the book. Till next time, Leo. Thank you for your time, sir. Guys, thank you for watching.